They said she was stubborn. But what they meant was she wouldn't bend. Not to them. Not to their threats, nor to the lash. She stood barefoot in the street of Dry Hollow, arms pinned behind her by 2 town deputies. The sun burned overhead. Her lip bled. Her hair, dark and tangled, clung to her bruised cheek in the desert heat. The crowd had gathered like they always did when cruelty paraded itself as justice. Faces behind kerchiefs and under wide brims. Some with curiosity. Some with shame. None with courage. The sheriff, a paunchy man with a silver badge that hadn't shone in years, stepped forward, holding a piece of parchment in one hand and a riding crop in the other. "You were given a lawful proposal," he said, voice too loud, eyes too small. "A good one. The boy's father has land. Standing. Protection. You spat on all that. You shamed his offer. In front of witnesses." She raised her chin. A slow trickle of blood slid down her neck, soaking into the collar of her dress. "He's a pig," she said. "And so are you." Someone in the crowd gasped. The sheriff's mouth twitched. A vein pulsed in his temple. 10 lashes, he said. "Let it be known, Dry Hollow don't abide disobedience from no girl thinking herself above her place." The deputies dragged her to the post outside the jail. A weathered thing with iron rings embedded in sun-cracked wood. She didn't cry. Not when her hands were tied. Not when her dress was cut at the back. Not when the sheriff raised the whip. The first lash landed with a sickening sound. She gritted her teeth. The second tore through the thin fabric. The third broke the skin. By the 6th, blood stained the wood behind her. By the 8th, she was barely conscious, but her eyes, those dark, defiant eyes, stayed open. When it ended, they cut her down and let her fall face first into the dust. No one helped. No one spoke. The sheriff spat beside her. "You'll learn, girl. Or you'll break." She was dragged into the jail. A single cell barely big enough to stretch in. A rusted cot. A bucket of water with more dirt than use. They locked her in, slammed the door, and left her there to think. She didn't. She knew already. Her name had never meant much. A simple thing, plain and frontier-born. But her uncle had told her once, when she was still small enough to ride on the back of his horse. Asterisk, names are what you do, not what they call you. Asterisk, what she had done was say no. Not scream. Not beg. Just, asterisk, no star. When Mr. Farrow, the land baron of the Southern Valley, sent his offer by letter, wrapped in gold-inked paper and smug entitlement, she had laughed. Then she burned it. When his son arrived 2 days later, expecting a bride, she met him at the porch with a shotgun. Told him to get off her family's land. Told him to keep his hands to himself. That had been the beginning. The barn was set ablaze that night. Her uncle caught in the smoke. They buried him by the edge of the creek the next day. She rode into town demanding justice. The sheriff called it an accident. The preacher muttered about God's will. And the people of Dry Hollow watched from their windows as the girl with no one left kept standing tall. That was 2 weeks ago. Now she lay on the cot, cheeks swollen, skin torn raw. The cell stank of old sweat and hopelessness. She didn't sleep. Sleep was dangerous. Sleep was surrender. The moon rose pale and hollow. Hooves echoed faintly in the night. A rider, slow and steady, passed the sheriff's office. She caught a glimpse through the iron bars. A tall figure in a dark coat. A wide-brimmed hat. Broad shoulders. And a horse that moved like it knew the world was watching. He paused just outside the cell window. She stared at him. He didn't speak, didn't move. Just looked at her. And then he tipped his hat. It wasn't sympathy. It wasn't pity. It was something else. Recognition, maybe. Like he saw a fire in her and remembered the heat. He rode on. The morning came brutal and bright. She sat against the wall, blood dried in stiff patches across her back. The door opened and the sheriff entered with 2 others. One she recognized, Pharaoh's son, smiling like a vulture. The other was a preacher, though she doubted God sent him. "She's got until sundown," the sheriff said. "Carriage will be ready. Ceremonies already arranged." "I'd rather be dead," she muttered. Pharaoh Jr. crouched in front of the bars. "Oh, you'll wish you were. But you'll wear white. And smile. Or we'll drag you back here and teach you manners proper." She didn't blink. Didn't flinch. "You'll look so pretty with a veil," he said. When they left, she pressed her forehead to the wall and breathed. If there was a God, he'd long since turned his eyes from Dry Hollow. Outside, the street buzzed with gossip. Inside, she made a decision. If no one would free her, she'd do it herself. With her own hands or her own teeth if needed. The cot had rusted springs. The bucket had a jagged edge. She'd seen women in worse places take worse chances. But before she could act, she heard it. Hoofbeats. Not many. Just one. Steady. Like thunder in the distance. Then silence. Then the crack of a gun. Then shouting. She sat upright. The deputies scrambled. One ran past the cell with a rifle, yelling about a man at the edge of town. A lunatic. A threat. Another shot rang out, closer now. Then another. And then the door blew open. He stood there like a storm-made flesh. Dust-coated coat. Pistol still warm in his hand. Smoke curling from the muzzle. His hat shadowed his face, but she could see the eyes. Sure. Quiet. Like a man who'd seen war and didn't flinch from it anymore. Come on, he said. She stared. He tossed a set of keys through the bars. I ain't got time to explain, he said. But you're coming with me or you ain't coming at all. She caught the keys. Hands trembling. Why? She asked. I saw what they did. That ain't a reason. He gave a small shrug. It's reason enough for me. She hesitated. Then stood. Her body screamed. Her wounds throbbed. But she moved. The cell door creaked open. He turned and walked back into the sunlight. She followed. Slowly. Every step was fire, but she followed. The street was empty. Bodies on the ground, sheriff's men wounded but breathing. His horse waited, calm as ever. She squinted up at him. Who are you? He mounted, then held out a hand. Does it matter? She considered. Then took it. He pulled her up behind him, strong and careful. She winced but held on. He turned the horse west, toward the open desert. You got a name? She asked, voice near his ear. He paused. I've got lots. Depends who's asking. And me? You're mine now, he said. That made her laugh. A dry, painful, bitter thing. But it was a laugh. Only for today, she said. He nudged the horse into motion. Today's all we need. And just like that, they vanished into the dust. The town watched through shuttered windows, holding its breath. No one spoke. No one followed. Not yet. But tomorrow would come. And Dry Hollow had never been good at forgetting. The desert stretched before them like a furnace with no end. Pale rock, scattered brush, and the wide, yawning sky, the only witness to two riders fleeing something rotten. The girl sat behind the cowboy, her arms tight around his middle. She wasn't holding on for safety. She was holding on to keep from falling apart. She didn't know his name. He hadn't offered it and she hadn't asked. It didn't matter out here. What mattered was he rode like someone who knew the land better than people, and that his coat bore the dust of long miles and hard choices. They stopped when the sun began to drop low, casting the mesas in long shadows. He led the horse to a narrow ravine, tucked them under an outcropping, and slid from the saddle without a word. She dismounted after, stiff and sore. Blood crusted beneath her dress, and every motion sent sparks up her spine. He gathered dry wood with the efficiency of habit, struck a fire that flared to life in two motions, and tossed her a tin of beans. She caught it without thanks. Eat, he said. We move again at dawn. She didn't move. You always bust women out of jails without a skin their name? He shrugged. Only the ones worth Savanda. She narrowed her eyes. That's supposed to be charm? No, he said, crouching by the fire. That's honesty. They sat across from each other, the flames flickering between them. The silence stretched, filled with the sound of wind and the occasional whinny of the horse. Finally, she cracked open the tin and took a bite. It tasted like tin and grit. Still, it was more than she'd had in 2 days. Back in Dry Hollow, she said quietly, they said I'd be better off married. Said resistance was just foolish pride. You believe that? He asked. No, she looked him in the eye. But I believed they'd kill me to prove their point. He nodded slow. They would have. That hung in the air for a moment, heavy and true. He leaned back against a rock, pulled a flask from his coat and took a swig. Then he passed it to her. She hesitated, then drank. Whiskey. Rough. Sure. But it burned the ache out of her throat. Who are you? She asked. He didn't answer at first. Just stared into the fire. Used to be a scout, he said finally. Cavalry. Rode with the army till I stopped believing orders were holy. What changed? They told me to burn a village that wasn't ours. Said it was preemptive. I said no. Lost my rank. Kept my soul. She studied him. You always ride alone? Since then. She nodded. That, at least, she understood. He tilted his head. What about you? You always fight back or just against marriage proposals? She smirked. Started young. My uncle raised me like a boy, riding, shooting, fixing fence. Said if I was going to survive out here, I needed more than manners and a bonnet. Smart man. He was. Till they burned him alive in our barn. Silence again. But not an empty one. She stared at the fire, eyes glassy. They made it look like an accident. Whole town watched. Nobody said a word. I screamed. I cursed. I begged. Nothing. The cowboy looked at her for a long moment. They took everything from you. No, she said softly. Not everything. Not yet. They slept under the rock, back to stone, gun within reach. She woke twice, once to a coyote howl, once to her own trembling hands. He didn't stir either time, though she had the feeling he wasn't sleeping. Dawn came fast and bright. They were moving before the sun fully rose. The trail wound through tight canyons, dry riverbeds, and scrub plains. She rode behind him in silence, watching how he read the land like scripture. Around midday they paused at a creek. He let the horse drink, then handed her a canteen. You got a plan? She asked. He glanced at her. Survive. She scoffed. That's not a plan. That's desperation with manners. He gave a faint grin. Got any better ideas? She didn't. They rode again. Late afternoon, the sound of hooves broke the quiet. Distant. Echoing. He stopped, raised a hand. She listened. More hooves. Multiple. Closing in. He turned the horse sharply, kicked into a gallop. She held tight as they raced down the ridge, the wind howling past them. Behind them dust rose. 6 riders, maybe more. Bounty hunters. They weren't quiet anymore. Gunfire cracked in the distance. The cowboy veered off the trail into narrow brush and broken rock. Hooves slipped. She nearly lost her grip. Where are we going? She shouted. Where they won't. They reached a split in the ravine. He dismounted, pulled her down. The horse wheezed, lathered in sweat. On foot from here, he said. Together they scrambled up the side of the gorge. Behind them the riders circled below. The cowboy led them into a tight pass, barely wide enough for a man. She followed, breath ragged, muscles burning. They stopped near the top, hidden behind a jut of stone. He drew his revolver. Checked the chamber. She pulled a small pistol from under her skirt. He raised a brow. Didn't think you were packing. Didn't think I needed to tell you. Fair enough. Below, the bounty hunters spread out. One of them dismounted, climbed a boulder for a better view. The cowboy aimed. No, she whispered. Let him get closer. He glanced at her but lowered the gun. The rider climbed higher, scanning the rocks. She waited, heart pounding. Then as the man turned, she stood, aimed, and fired. The shot was clean. The man dropped. Shouts below. Chaos. The cowboy fired next. 2 more shots. 2 more down. The rest fled. She crouched, breathing hard. Her hands shook, but her aim had been steady. He looked at her, eyes serious. You ever kill a man before? No, she said. How do you feel? Alive, she whispered. They climbed down once the dust settled. Took one of the abandoned horses and rode hard until the sky bled orange. That night, they camped in silence again. The fire between them warmer now. Shared blood changed things. She stared into the flames. Thank you. He didn't look up. For what? For not asking if I was okay. He gave a small nod. Didn't think you were. I'm not. He passed her the flask. She drank. After a while she asked, Why'd you really help me? He sighed, rubbed the bridge of his nose. Because once, years ago, I saw the same thing happen to someone else. A girl. Same age. Same kind of town. I rode on. Didn't stop. Told myself it wasn't my fight. And she hung herself a week later. She didn't speak. He met her gaze. You reminded me of her. Only you didn't break. I figured that was worth stopping for. She looked away. Her voice was rough. You think they'll come again? Without a doubt. She stared out at the dark horizon. Then we better go to them first. He didn't argue. You're sure? He asked. They beat me, she said. They burned what I loved. They told me I was nothing. I'm not hiding. I'm not running. I'm going back. He studied her a long while. Then said, All right. They doused the fire. Packed up their things. She looked back once at the dying coals, then mounted the horse without hesitation. They rode west toward the town that tried to bury her. Toward reckoning. They rode under a blood-orange sky, the sun dipping low like it had seen enough of the day and wanted no part of what came next. Wind tugged at her hair, whipping it into her face. The cowboy rode ahead, silent and steady, like he'd already buried the part of himself that used to ask questions. She rode just behind, gaze fixed on the horizon. Dry Hollow waited out there. That grave of a town. That place that took her family, her home, her name, and tried to take her will too. But it hadn't. Not fully. They rode into the canyon pass by moonlight, hoofbeats echoing against high stone walls. The wind picked up, carrying the dry scent of mesquite and something fouler, smoke. She inhaled sharply. "They're burning again," she said. The cowboy nodded once. "They're expecting us." They didn't stop. Didn't sleep. The horses moved like ghosts through the night. At dawn they crested the ridge overlooking Dry Hollow. It hadn't changed. It never did. Same crooked rooftops. Same leaning saloon. Same church bell that tolled every Sunday for sins the preacher never faced. But something was different now. The town seemed tense. Men patrolled the streets. Rifles slung over shoulders. Horses ready and saddled. "They think you're dead," the cowboy said. She smiled. "Let's disappoint them." He dismounted, checked his revolvers, and handed her a second pistol. He cleaned it for her. Oiled the chamber. A quiet gesture. A soldier's respect. They made their way down the slope, ditching the horses in a ravine. The sun climbed fast, hot and merciless. As they approached town, the streets emptied like breath from a broken lung. Curtains twitched. Doors slammed. Boots scuffed against wood as watchers disappeared inside. But the sheriff didn't hide. He stood in the middle of the street, badge dull on his chest, shotgun resting across one arm. Beside him, Pharaoh Jr. sneered like he'd been born with a punchable face. Around them, half a dozen deputies shifted nervously, hands near holsters. "Well, I'll be," the sheriff drawled. "The desert didn't eat you after all." Pharaoh stepped forward. "Should have let her rot, cowboy. Now you're both gonna die for not knowing your place." She stepped up beside her rescuer, eyes locked on the sheriff. "We're not here for mercy. We're here for truth." "That's so?" the sheriff said. She nodded. "You beat me bloody for saying no. Burned my uncle for protecting me. Framed me as hysterical. You thought no one would care. That the desert would swallow me like it swallowed others. You resist the law, you pay for it," the sheriff said loud enough for windows to hear. "You ain't the law," the cowboy said, stepping forward. "You're just the loudest bully with the most guns." The sheriff's smile thinned. "I got a whole town behind me." "Then bring it," she said. "Or shut up and run." Guns were drawn. The town held its breath. The first shot came not from her, nor from the cowboy, but from the preacher. It rang out wild and panicked, from the church steps where he stood, rifle shaking in old hands. "Stop this madness," he cried. "God sees what you've done." The sheriff turned livid. "You stay out of this." "You lied to me," the preacher barked. "Said the girl was violent. Unclean. Said her uncle attacked a deputy when he just tried to protect her." Murmurs rose behind shuttered windows. A crack had formed. Doubt crept in. The sheriff's jaw tightened. He raised his shotgun. But the cowboy was faster. One shot. The sheriff staggered. Dropped to his knees. Not dead, yet. But bleeding from the shoulder. His weapon clattered to the dust. Pharaoh Jr. lunged toward her, screaming, "You'll regret this, you little." She fired once. Caught him in the leg. He screamed, fell hard. The deputies froze. One dropped his weapon. Another backed away. "You can stay," the cowboy said, voice calm. "But understand, this ain't your town no more." A third deputy, a younger man with fear in his eyes, raised his hands. "We didn't sign up for this." The others followed. They dropped guns. Backed away. Pharaoh crawled through the dirt toward her, blood soaking his pants. "You think you've won? My father'll come. He'll burn the whole place." She walked toward him, boots crunching gravel. Stood over him, calm and unshaking. "Then tell him to come," she said. "But next time don't bring cowards." He spit at her. She didn't move. The preacher approached slowly, rifle lowered. "You want justice?" he said, eyes weary. "Then do it. Kill them both." She stared at him. "That's not justice. That's revenge." The cowboy watched her. Waiting. She holstered her pistol. "They'll stand trial," she said. "Not here. Somewhere the sun shines straighter." There was silence. Then, slowly, people began to step out from their homes. Women with shawls. Miners with soot on their hands. Shopkeepers with cautious eyes. One woman crossed the street. A bruised cheek. A thin child behind her. "Thank you," she whispered. Another voice joined in. "About damn time someone stood up." Then another. And another. The sheriff lay groaning in the dirt, staring at the town that no longer feared him. The cowboy helped her to the porch of the jailhouse. Sat beside her. "You did it," he said. "No," she said. "We did it." He looked at her, then at the town, where people were gathering around the wounded lawmen, stripping them of badges and guns. "I ain't much for staying in one place," he said. "I know," she replied. "You gonna stay?" She looked around. At the chapel. The dry well. The burnt patch of earth where her uncle once stood. And the people finally waking from a long, slow nightmare. "No," she said. "Not forever. But I'll help clean it up. I owe that much." He nodded. They sat in silence as the sun reached its peak. Children began sweeping the saloon steps. A blacksmith hammered a loose board back into place. The preacher helped bind the sheriff's shoulder, wordless now, heavy with regret. A new day had begun. Messy. Raw. But different. "You think they'll try again?" she asked. "They always do," he said. "But we'll be ready." He stood, dusted off his coat, and reached for the reins of a fresh horse. "You sure you don't want to know my name?" he asked, half smiling. She shook her head. "Not yet. I think I'll remember you just fine." He tipped his hat. "If you ever ride east, follow the river. Look for a place with red rock and no fences." "Why?" "Because some things don't need walls to be safe." He mounted and turned toward the trail. She watched him ride away, the dust swirling behind him like a promise not broken, just left open-ended. And for the first time in weeks, she didn't feel hunted. She felt free. But freedom, she knew, came with a price. And Dry Hollow still had debts to settle. The days that followed were dry and sharp-edged. Dust coated everything, hands, hearts, memories. She woke early each morning, not because she had to, but because something inside her refused rest. The town was still standing, but its spine had been shattered and needed setting. She took to rebuilding not with boards or nails but with words and grit. She spoke at gatherings in front of the chapel, cleared out the jailhouse, and stood beside the preacher when he confessed his silence to the people. He had watched too long and said too little. He wept. She didn't comfort him. She let him own the weight. They hanged the sheriff 2 towns over, proper trial, proper gallows. The lawman who stayed behind saw justice carried out, and no one raised a hand to stop it. Pharaoh Jr. was carted off to a federal prison. The cries of his father never came, but his money did. Quiet men with dark suits and cleaner hands arrived weeks later, asking questions and making threats with smiles. She answered none of them. They didn't like that. She knew it wasn't over. It never really was. At night, she stood on the old burnt plot of land where her uncle once taught her to shoot, to ride, to live without apology. She spoke to the silence as if he still stood beside her. She told him about the town's slow healing, about the boy fixing the saloon doors, about the girl from the mercantile who no longer flinched when a man raised his voice, about the cowboy who left like wind leaves a canyon, without a sound, but leaving the shape of himself behind. And then a letter arrived. No name on it. Just a red rock stamped on the wax seal. She opened it by lantern light, fingers trembling. "Follow the river," it read. "Come see what's next." She folded the letter once, then again, and tucked it beneath her shirt. The next morning she mounted a horse. Not the same one from before, but a younger, smarter thing she'd broken herself. People gathered to see her off. The preacher handed her a new Bible. The shopkeeper gave her dried meat and flint. A girl slipped a wildflower into her saddlebag. No one asked her to stay. No one had to. She rode out of Dry Hollow under a silver sky, wind behind her, sun at her back. She didn't look back. The past had already burned. She followed the river as he said. 4 days, through canyons that whispered and ridgelines that scraped the sky. She crossed dry creeks and saw wolves in the distance. Once she heard a gunshot echo for miles but didn't flinch. On the 6th night she found the place. A clearing near a red rock shaped like a bent finger. A fire already going. A kettle on the flame. And there he was, leaning against a log, hat low over his eyes. "Took you long enough," he said, not looking up. She slid from the saddle, legs sore. "Didn't know I was expected." "You were." They ate in silence for a while. Beans again, but better now. She'd grown used to the taste. Or maybe it just reminded her of the first night she didn't feel like prey. Finally she asked, "You been watching Dry Hollow?" "Some," he said. "Heard they hanged the sheriff." "They did." He nodded. "Good." The fire popped. Stars hung low like they wanted to listen. She glanced at him. "So what's this place?" "Land I claimed," he said. "No deed. No fences. Just freedom." "For you?" For anyone with a reason to start again. She looked around. The quiet, the openness, the peace of it. I don't know what I am now, she admitted. Not just a survivor. Not just angry. You're what comes after all that. She stared into the fire. What if I don't know how to be that? You'll figure it out. You already are. They didn't say much more that night. In the morning she woke before him. Walked to the cliff edge. The view stretched out forever, red rock and brush and sky so wide it made her dizzy. She breathed it in like a promise. Behind her the cowboy stirred. Walked over. Said nothing, just stood beside her. And then a shot rang out. They both dropped low, instincts flaring. Another shot, closer this time. The sound cracked like a whip across the still air. He drew his gun, scanning the ridge. She moved behind cover, pulling her pistol. 3 riders came into view. Dark coats. No badges. The kind of men who traveled under someone else's coin. Company, she muttered. He didn't respond. Just watched their formation, tracked their movements. They followed you. Or followed the letter. Either way, they want us dead. The riders dismounted, rifles drawn. One shouted from behind a boulder. You stole what belonged to the Pharaoh family. You'll pay for it now. She shouted back. They stole more first. Pause. Then, the land doesn't care who bled first. Only who bleeds last. He looked at her. You ready? Always. The first shot was his, quick and clean. It dropped one rider before he got his rifle up. The second man returned fire. Dust exploded near her feet. She ducked, moved sideways, fired once, missed, fired again, hit his leg. The third flanked wide. Smart. Almost too smart. But she'd learned more than just how to survive. She waited, listened for his breath, the snap of a twig. When he crept over a boulder, she was already behind him. Her shot went straight through his chest. The second man tried to flee. The cowboy didn't let him. When the dust cleared, 3 bodies lay still. And she didn't feel joy. Just clarity. She stood over them, breath steady. They'll send more. They always do, he said again. She holstered her gun. Then we don't hide. He raised a brow. We build, she continued. We plant roots. We make noise. That a war cry? No, she said. That's a beginning. He smiled faintly. Knew you had fire in you. She looked around at the red rock and sky and endless horizon. Let's make this a place worth fighting for. They buried the men outside the clearing. No markers. The next day she rode out to the nearest town. Bought lumber. A mirror. A coat for winter. When she returned, he'd already started clearing a space for a cabin. They worked side by side, not talking much. Just moving together like the desert wind and stone, patient and exacting. More people came in the weeks that followed. Women who had nowhere to go. Men who'd grown tired of killing for pay. A boy who'd lost his family to a mining company's greed. They brought little, but it was enough. And slowly something grew. A place without chains. A town with no name but honor. One night, as she stood on the porch of the still unfinished cabin, he joined her. You ever think about what they'll call us? He asked. No, she said. But I care what they'll remember. And what's that? That we didn't run. That we didn't kneel. That we looked the worst men in the eye and stayed standing. He nodded. And when they come again? She smiled. We'll be ready. Together. The wind howled gently through the canyon. The stars blinked overhead. And somewhere in the dark, the world shifted, just slightly, toward something better.